So this is called a Z depth. And it basically just, it renders from black to white, you know, the front to the back of your scene. And you normally have the ability to control how far away you want to set the back and how far away you want to set the front. So this is really powerful for, well, as you probably imagine, adding some like atmospheric depth to a render. But it's also really powerful. If you can find this one, it's super powerful because not only does it allow you to kind of, I guess in this instance, so this is where starting to use blend styles, like layer styles, is really helpful. So you'll probably be familiar with some of these, but that's what this like really long list is at the top of your layer stack. And basically what all of these do is they dictate a set of rules about how that layer interacts with the layers below it. So the most useful one, particularly in architecture, is to know about multiply, because what multiply does is it allows you to drop anything that's black onto the layers below, but it ignores anything that's white. So if you have drawings or sketches that you want to drop onto a sheet and you want stuff to happen underneath them, you just put them on a multiply layer and then the white disappears. You don't have to like cut out the lines, which is, I remember showing people this who'd spent hours trying to cut out, you know, sketches, and you know, you just turn it onto a multiply layer and it's it just drops the white out. Sometimes you have to kind of clean that up. So this is actually a good use for what levels does. So levels is another adjustment layer. It's available down here next to your curves. And what levels does is it essentially, you see the histogram up here. Let me just put a new one on so you can see it from scratch. So if I drop that on here and I link it down, you'll see that, you know, that's the black to white spectrum in that image is actually going kind of more from like a gray to white, and that you can see that. So like the histogram is kind of starting slightly further in from the left hand side, so that would be black. And so what you can do is you can narrow the range that Photoshop is showing you in the spectrum, and the easiest way to see what I mean is actually just to play around with these values. So if I shift this in, basically it moves the black point in that image to being kind of, you know, it starts at black basically, and then depending on where you put the midpoint, you can start pushing, you know, where the white is and where the black is. So this, for example, so if I turn these two off and apply this on top of if I change this to a screen, it basically does the opposite to a multiply. It lets the white sit on the page and the blacks get dropped out. So you're only applying the kind of white elements. So with regards to a Z depth, what this means is you using the combination of levels, I apply that to there, I can basically make it foggier or less foggy depending on that levels layer, because it's just pushing that like amount of fog basically, you know, further forward or further back. And then if it's, you know, a bit too intense, you can just reduce the amount that's kind of impacting the scene or visibility. I mean, opacity and fill are, to be honest, I've never really gone to the bottom of what the difference between the two of them is. I use fill more often than opacity, but they do very similar things. But you can see that just allows you to add a little bit of sort of atmospheric depth, which this is an unusual example because it's kind of an interior scene, but you've actually got quite a long perspective into the outside space. So images tend to look just a lot more convincing if you have some difference between the kind of the level of intensity of color, and particularly darks should always be like darker in the foreground and paler and less like contrasty in the background. And this just gives you an additional way of doing that kind of in Photoshop. So that's one of the steps that I will nearly always go through in the initial setup to try and work towards, you know, setting up the render. And